I want to welcome everybody to the first presentation of this camp meeting. Let's open with a word of prayer. It sounds a bit loud to me. I don't know if everybody's okay with that. Holy God, we thank you that you have brought us here at this moment in Earth's history to not only understand the great controversy, not only to understand our part in that controversy, but to understand why it is that we think and participate in the way that we do. You have shown us time and time again the reason that we need to understand ourselves is because we need to understand you. Help us to do that. In Jesus' name. Amen. It goes without saying that we are living in interesting times. I'm sure it's been just over a week now. The past week has been significant to each of us individually and as a movement. Depending on how the camp meeting goes, my second presentation, which is at the end of the camp, may end up being a question and answer. Or it may be a continuation of our conversation now. So I'll be asking people questions. Please keep your responses short so people can keep a track of what you're saying. So I want to begin with what happened at the ICM. Speaking to people privately gives me an opportunity to clarify my own thoughts as I try to understand what individuals are thinking and to get a feel of what's happening broadly across the movement. As we all know, there were 2 studies presented which I think took people by surprise. And the reason why people were surprised at least to my recollection, it's the first camp meeting that I've been to where the main speakers have, depending on how you want to phrase it, either different or contradictory different understandings of the same message. I don't think I've been to a major camp meeting where that has happened before. Either people speak about different subjects or they complement one another. I say two studies. At ICM, or that you've watched those presentations by now. So the two presentations that Elder in what she shared, the fourth, she did two before the RNC. The RNC was the convention in July. And she then did a follow-up presentation soon afterwards, which we might call the repeat and enlarge. And then there was a further presentation where she commented again on what happened at the RNC. Then she did two presentations at the ICM, which gave a conceptual overview of the RNC event. Two presentations. Could someone in a sentence or a little phrase summarize what she shared? How do you view what she was trying to say in her two studies? Put your hands up, anybody? Time is short. If you give a long answer, Raquel, I'm just going to cut you off, I'm afraid. Would you have a mic or should I repeat? Okay. Please do English. It's easy for everybody.
English. She talked about a new threefold union.
Thank you. Anyone else? No one else?
She talked about the manifestation of sexism.
I can't understand what you're saying, sorry. The echo, it's not you.
She talked about the manifestation of sexism during that convention, and and
I got that.
and how at the end of the convention, Trump has been crowned. Trump has been crowned at the end.
Okay. So, just going to get a summary of that. I'm going to rephrase the answer in the way that I would like us to understand it. She spoke about a threefold union, and the model she gets that from is given in the Great Controversy and the Bible. There is nothing new about that. Second point that she wanted to make, I don't want to use the word redefine. I'm just going to use the word define. And it's what Christiane said. I'm going to say it that way. She defines the family. And what I mean by that is she's defining the role of men and women. The reason why I say the family is because Republicans are not opposed to women working or having careers or being successful in the workplace. It's a misnomer to portray their ideology in that way, I think. But everybody's got their role. Eleanor's study. Anybody want to give a summary of what Eleanor was saying, what the point that she was making? This is the second time she has spoken publicly or internationally. It's a follow-on from her 5-part study that she did earlier in the year. Anybody? Curtis?
She identified that her aim was to identify the fact that 9/11 is the harbinger of the Sunday law.
Ask someone else to do another point. Janice? Okay, Lizanne? You'll need a mic.
I think she was also making application from Daniel 11, 40 to 45 extra on that, for showing that.
An application of Daniel 11, 40 to 45. To show what?
Actually, also that line 11 is a harbinger
Okay.
of the Sunday law.
Anyone else want to pick up a second point that we'll go with Janice and then Pascal.
I think one point was to show that she made application that at shipwreck we will see an attack by radical Islam.
Okay. Pascal?
I think she wanted to
take another witness, the fifth line, to show that the radical Islam will be present at the Sunday law.
Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I know people have got more thoughts. When she did her original 5-part study, there were 2 points that people questioned. I don't know if people did that publicly or privately, but it got through to her through the grapevine, I'll say. And I think at the ICM, she wanted to address 2 points. So the first point was that 9/11 points to the Sunday law. Want to make it clear, she's not denying the standard movement understanding that it points to the close of probation, which is found in Testimonies of the Church, Volume 9. So the statement about 9/11 to the Sunday law is not new. It's a repeat of what she's already stated publicly. And the second point was? Is that what you're going to answer, Curtis? There's 2 points you wanted to bring forth.
I don't know if it's the one that you were thinking of, but it's because of that relationship, the events surrounding January 6th in 2001 would
Not worry about that.
Okay.
That's all detail. Tamina?
Islam being counterfeit, Judge?
So the second point was, call it the east wind being a counterfeit. IE? So the east wind being a counterfeit. So this is my perspective. I've not asked her specifically. This is my interpretation of what her studies were about. Both speakers might disagree with what I'm saying. They might want to explain it differently. But I think each of us should have an opinion of what they were trying to teach you. And hopefully they should be able to confirm whether your understanding is correct or not. So I think Eleanor was trying to show that 9/11 is the Sunday law, or points to the Sunday law, harbinger. And also that the east wind is a counterfeit. And there are other counterfeits too, as we're all aware. So those were the 2 studies that were done. And there's a third study that comes up. So that third study is the study of Pedro. And how does that study come up? How does it get introduced into the psyche or the mindset or the thinking at ICM. So several of you have already alluded to that. And it's introduced through Eleanor's study. So I think someone called it did some here say the fifth line? Someone say that? So I'm not saying Pedro is calling it the fifth line. But we'll put it here. And this comes from Acts 27. And this is going to be one of the lines of evidence that Eleanor is going to use to demonstrate or prove what? That 9/11 is a harbinger of the Sunday law. And then I think Lisanne said she also went to Daniel 11 verses 40 to 45. To demonstrate that as well. Lisanne?
Just asking if it wasn't that she said it's the third ship. with the
Yes,
fifth line,
it's the
ship.
third ship. I wasn't trying to go into any details about her approach. So I've just called it the fifth line or Acts 27. It's not my objective to analyze or critique that study that she did. I just want us all to be on the same page conceptually of what has happened. So once both have presented, I'm not saying people were asking who that friend was. But there begins an upswell. I don't want to call it. There's an increase in feeling at the ICM because many people are already aware of Pedro's study. Even though it hasn't been publicly presented in English. And Eleanor's mention of that study that Pedro had done helped give impetus to the request that Pedro should be allowed to teach his study in a more prominent fashion, which basically means in English. And for that to be done in any useful manner, it would have had to be done before November the 5th. Why? Why does it have to be before the election? We'll go with Gabriella.
Because a lot of Pedro's study is involved with the outcome of the elections.
Eunice? You going to say the same? Okay, so that's fine. She was going to say the same. So what was the core component or the foundation of Pedro's study? It's a bit more than just the election. Blessing?
Time for the Sunday law.
Okay, time for the Sunday law. Anything else?
Well, that's what I can think of
Okay.
as the main point.
Curtis?
The role that the anchors and the sailors play in that story.
Without the symbology, what's the point of his study? Or the core message?
That between Panium, the ship is being saved from shipwreck up until
Okay.
gets shipwrecked at the Sunday law.
Natalie?
This is not my answer, someone else's, but I'll say it anyway. That it was going to be a woman president of Blackpool.
So Natalie says her answer was that the election was going to be won by Kamala Harris. That's what I understood the nub or the whole point of his study. The issue about Sunday law and the details of that was interesting. He was also adamant about one other point. Anybody? Nothing to do with January. No, nothing to do with January. I don't think that was a major component of his study. Nothing to do with anchors. Harris was going to win for another 4 years. No. So what's the point, the other point of the study? To demonstrate that even though Harris would win, somehow or another, the election would be taken or stolen from her and given to Trump. Is that a fair way of representing it? So a woman would win, but the election would be taken from her and given to Trump. The timing is a secondary issue. The mechanism for that change to happen was also secondary. I think. So we've just done a summary of what was done at ICM. And I'm not trying to critique or analyze any of those three messages. So sometime at ICM, I made a public statement I think it was then, about Pedro's study. So I've spoken to some people about it already, so they already know what I'm about to say. And what did I say about that? This upswell, this cry from the movement to have his study shared publicly. What was my response to that? So I believe I made a public statement on it, I think. Anybody? Janice. Well, just Janice and Curtis. Janice. Go ahead.
That you have heard about the study, and it came to your attention, but because of the feedback from other members that you got on the study, you didn't feel the need up to then to let it be shared or publicly, or to
Stop there.
promote it.
Stop it. Keep it. And finish. If you, or summarize in a short way what you just said.
Because of the feedback you had received from other members, you didn't feel the need to promote the study.
I'm going to go with that because that's a fair representation of what I recall saying. So in response to this upswell of requests, I'm going to say the reason why it hasn't been shared publicly, or I haven't felt the need to promote it, was because of the feedback that I had received was that there were significant problems with the study. Not from everybody, but from a few people. And that was sufficient cause for me not to deem it necessary to promote or to give it a wider audience. Who was I speaking to when I made that statement? So it was to the people who were requesting for that study to be made public. The people that I'd already spoken to, I had interaction with before, those people who had reviewed the study, who had dialogued with him, was I speaking to them? Obviously not, because they don't see any need to have the message promoted. Have I lost anybody? Have I lost you? Okay, so I'm going to just summarize what I've said. I didn't review the study. I deliberately didn't review the study because I didn't want to be a gatekeeper. Other people had seen the study. Reviewed it, and some had spoken to Pedro. Those people had told me that they didn't see merit in the study. So I didn't see a need to take that study and proactively to promote it to the movement. I was speaking to the people who wanted the study brought to the public domain. I wasn't speaking to the people who had already reviewed the study and didn't see any merit in it. That makes sense? So how did the people who already knew about the message, how did they know about it? How were they informed enough to tell me about it? They must have studied it. They must have studied to a level that they could make an informed decision about the study. I want to suggest, if I didn't say it then, that the people who I'm communicating with, who Pedro had communicated with, who had an opinion, were, we'll call it in this study, experienced teachers. So the experienced teachers in the movement, some of them had already given feedback that the study did not have merit. And the whole issue revolves around what subject? It wasn't about how Trump would steal the election. It wasn't even that Trump would win. The issue of contention, without getting into the symbology of the anchors, was that a woman would win, or the Democrats would win, depending on the point you want to make. Depending upon the point you want to make, or the point that Pedro wants to make. So that's what's at issue. And the people who are requesting this upswell, that are asking for it to be publicly shared, I'm just going to say they all know, or almost all know, what the study is about, what the issues are about. The reason why I'm asking these questions is not about Pedro's study. It's not about the experienced teachers in this movement who said the study either was wrong or had no merit. if it's not Pedro, and it's not those few members or teachers in the movement, what am I asking? What am I trying to draw out? What's the point that I want us to see? Curtis. We have a fair few people in it. Other people could have a go.
How we arrive at the truth as a movement.
I'm not bothered about methodology.
Not methodology, consensus.
I'm not worried about consensus. Not Tamina. Anyone else? Lizanne?
I think it showed the kind of unrest in the movement, like you talked before about this being polite when we are around, but that there's inside more unrest and it's not so polite at all.
Okay, so Lizanne said that I'm trying to show that there's an unrest within our movement, unhappiness. On the surface, people are polite, but there's a strong emotion that people are having that they're not willing to share publicly. Tamina.
The mindset of the movement and our bias. That's the problem.
So, what I want us to see, a large swathe, I think the majority of our movement have become so confused about prophecy that they actually believed that a woman could win this election. Pedro's study allowed that win to be annulled that eventually a man, Trump, would win. I'm not critiquing his study, the methodology. What I want us to see is that as a movement, so many of us believed in the possibility, had the hope that a woman could win. That's what I want us to understand. I don't want to manipulate or twist the narrative. Pedro was like a sacrificial lamb that those who wanted to have his study promoted turned him into. Because deep down, you either had a hope, a belief, a dream, that stand against prophecy, that you wanted a woman to win. Where everything tells us, all of our prophetic understanding, that that was just never going to happen. And either the tail has been wagging the dog.
Et même si le chien
Entweder,
tourne autour de la queue,
Who's the tail?
c'est qui la queue?
O la cola del perro estaba
Who's the
dando.
dog?
Qui est le chien?
No sé no sé qué significa esa expresión. Disculpe.
This movement is the dog.
Ce mouvement
Este
est
movimiento es
le
el
chien.
perro.
And what's been wagging us?
Et qu'est-ce qui
¿Qué es
nous
lo que ha estado?
wagging us?
All the media articles that we imbibe.
Et qu'est-ce qui nous trouble en fait?
Sorry.
¿Qué es lo que nos estaba
Les
engañando?
médias, les articles des
Todos
médias sur lesquels nous demeurons.
Se
need to take a
mezclaron
break.
todas las voces.
Alors, on fait une pause.
Da gab es ein Problem. Alle Sprachen wurden auf einmal gehört.
Todos los idiomas están mezclados en este momento.
There's a problem with the translation for those who are not sure.
Hay problema con la traducción.
Back
Also es gibt Probleme mit der Übersetzung.
Okay.
Il y a un problème avec la traduction. Donc,
The network dropped and the translations got cancelled. Can we carry on while they're waiting? I mean, summarize, not move forward. 30 seconds. Okay, so we had a short break. What I want us to try to see, what it seems to me has or is happening, is that we'll say as a movement, however you want to define what that is, the majority of the people the articles that are shared, discussed, have created an environment amongst us where sufficient numbers of God's priesthood either believed or hoped that a woman would win, that the Democrats would have another 4-year cycle, even though that's not what Pedro was teaching. We understand that. And the question that I want each of us to think about for ourselves is, how could it be that you or your neighbor, person that you're sitting next to, at this late stage in our experience, could have got things so wrong? I'm going to disagree with several people who have made either private or public statements that Pedro's study was mismanaged by the leadership. By me. This is not an issue of equality or gendered behavior, we might want to see it as that. I'm not saying there isn't a story there. What I want us to see in this study isn't how good the questions were, wasn't the mistakes that Pedro made or didn't make. It's why, despite experienced teachers saying there are significant mistakes in this study, whatever their arguments were, and you'll notice if you go back to that Q&A, I think none of the questioners gave a conceptual reason of why the study was wrong. But what I'm suggesting now is the question that should be asked is why yourselves hoped, dreamed, were so interested in a study that was opposed to prophecy. And why it's taking the events of November the 5th to come to that realization. We all understand what tri means. Tri means three. T-R-I. Threefold. So we know, I think as of yesterday, Republicans. And the question is, not the media pundits, not the commentators, the opinion writers, not why they got it wrong. Not why the pollsters or the people who do the polls, why they got it wrong. But why we got it wrong. That's what I want each of us to try to understand individually and collectively. I believe Elder Terry is on public record saying that a black woman was never going to win that election. Whether you want to go down the issue of race or gender. I'm not promoting her study when I make that comment. But despite statements like that, despite our understanding of the 2016 election, despite the old study of the 5th and 7th church, the 5th and 7th head, the 5th and 7th kingdom, church, head, and kingdom. we're still willing to believe, many of us were, that somehow prophecy would turn out differently. So I've been giving short snippets on the media broadcasts over the last week. One of the points that you should be able that should jump out at you is that this election is a repeat of the 2016 election. And what's concerning, if it's not concerning, it should be, is why so many of us didn't see that ahead of time. It's not a comment about the timing of the Sunday law or the nature of the Sunday law. It's about how and why we got to the place where we thought a woman would win. If anybody's got any comments, any criticisms about what I'm saying, a defense of your own thoughts. Raquel?
I want to ask, unconsciously, I thought about it. Well, I did think that Trump was the prophetic person who was going to win or had to win. But I was asking myself, in the case that you said that we wanted a woman to win, and I wanted a woman to win. But in my mind, I said to myself, it's not, it doesn't fit to what we know about prophecy.
I'll stop you there. It's okay.
Okay.
So that was a short testimony, which we won't translate. Curtis? Just want to make a point. We don't think unconsciously. Your thoughts were very conscious, like everybody's thoughts are, and they're easily manipulated by what we hear or see, or the group that we connect to. Curtis? I don't know.
So it was a question when you spoke about the biases that you're pointing out that have been picked up by members in the movement. Could you clarify how you think those biases have developed? Is it solely a matter of reading polls and thinking Kamala had a chance? Or do you... Or is it related to the biases that we've developed because of an ideology?
So there are 2 points of the question. Have we Have we become biased because of the polls? Because of the opinion pieces that we read? The tail controlling us, the dog. Have they warped our brains? Or have we seen what's going on in the world with our prophetic glasses on, with everything that we've been taught, and have we created our own bias? Is that fair representation of what you said? It's a bit of both, I believe. But I think the problem is more systemic. So I don't normally make sweeping statements. I've already done one in this study. So maybe I'll do a couple of more. I'm in the mood for it. Two years ago now, I'll go with. What did I begin to teach? No, Righteousness by Faith is a way old study. No Levites, no priests, no Nethinims. Is it 3 years ago? 3 years ago. That has been a recurring theme since then. People have asked why. Why no Levites and no Nethinims? People have got agitated about their salvation. I don't understand why. When I've spoken privately to people, it bemuses me why people are so worried about the mechanism of their salvation. Because that to me is Christianity 101. A basic understanding of Christianity, which is another bias that many of us have, which we won't go into. So what I'm about to say is not some far-reaching statement that controls or defines or directs everything else. The great test that we speak about, that we believe in, which is equality or gender equality or LGBTQ rights, however you want to phrase it, racism, nationalism, that is true. There's no arguing that. But I want us to remember, is any of that new? You go to Germany between the two wars, and what's one of the things that is going to allow the Third Reich to come to prominence? When they grab power and justify grabbing power. What's going on in Germany socially at that time? It's a hotbed of what? We'll just go with that. LGBTQ issues. Part of their rise is their position or comment against the LGBTQ community there. You go back to any point in history and the subject of equality is a recurring subject. That's where part of the Midnight Christ study begins. In the year 1850. Civil War, compromise. It's all about the civil rights movement of that era. We're okay with that. I'm already almost on public record, not quite. Saying, if you jump forward 38 years to 1888, what's the issue there? Human rights. And Jones is it's a liar. What's Jones lying about? That the great test is the Sabbath. When he knows it isn't, he's going to argue that it isn't, but he's going to toe the policy line. So you can go to any history and you'll see it's always about human rights or equality. Or we might call it the golden rule. So when you come to our history now, this election, your views, what your understanding of the great test is, how you see its fulfillment in world events, what do you think the issues are? I'll answer for you. Maybe you're a bit shy. It's abortion rights and LGBTQ rights. That's what this movement stands on. And everything that we see is framed through that lens. And what's the problem? Go back to November 5th. What's the issue? What's the problem with our position? The election, the Sunday law. I'm not saying the election was the Sunday law. The election, the Sunday law, the great test for America was not abortion rights and was not LGBTQ rights. This movement is out of sync. It's not synchronized with reality. It's not synchronized with what's going on in the world. And so when Curtis asked this question about these biases, that's a major one. Our perspective of end-time prophecy is not in agreement with what's going on in the world. And when you get to a position like that, a dangerous position like that, it's easy to make mistakes, which is what this movement did last week. We got everything wrong. We wanted to believe things that weren't going to happen. Because of our understanding of what the great test is. According to the election last week, the election, Sunday law, the great test, there were two issues. There've always been two issues. What were the two issues? The economy and immigration. If you go back to 1888, it's the same issue. You could even go to 1850 and see it's the same issue if you wanted to. It's not the abortion issue, and it's not LGBTQ rights. So that I'm not misunderstood. I'm not saying that those issues are unimportant. I'm not even saying this is a double negative, I'm sorry. I'm not saying that they are not the great test. For us, maybe for God, maybe for the great controversy. This is not an attack of our established understanding of the message. I'm not trying to change any of that. But what I want us to see, all three speakers of the Terry, Elena, and Pedro, within a very short time frame, whether you a 12-month period, mid-2024 to mid-2025, they all come to the same conclusion that we're at the Sunday law. Whatever dates each of them has, that this election cycle marks the Sunday law. I'm not saying that is some movement position. I'm saying that's what they all say. If that's the case, we have already seen, and you will see, that the issues that control America will not be LGBTQ rights and will not be abortion rights. I'm not saying they won't be discussed. I'm not saying they're not significant to American culture, to American governance. This is not a comment upon our belief. The issues that will direct America, at least for the next 2 years, which all those speakers are saying is a Sunday law history, will be about the economy and immigration, or the southern border. And if you weren't sure about that, just look at Trump's policy now. Not his policy, I should say, his decisions in who has been selected for the various posts in his cabinet. The writing is already on the wall what the issues are. What their agenda is. So I'm going to throw in one comment. Two comments. One of them is about democracy, which I'm not going to comment on. I think many of us don't understand what democracy is. And the other one is originalism. And I think many of us have a misunderstanding, not what originalism means, but what it means today. In respect to what SCOTUS, the Supreme Court, are trying to do. And why do we misunderstand? I'll say this. When the subject of originalism has come up at SCOTUS, the main subject that it's been brought up through is what? When we look at the court cases, we say originalism or whatever the alternative is, what's the issue or the framework of those discussions, according to us? Women's rights. If I can say it simply. However you want to define what women's rights are. They're the cases that have gone up and have failed because of the fight between originalism and its alternative. I think we have misunderstood the mindset of SCOTUS. When they are dealing as originalists and what it is that they are trying to achieve, their agenda. Because our movement believes their agenda is anti-women. And I don't think it is. I don't think that's what their agenda is. The consequences certainly is anti-women. But that's not their objective. And I think it's worthy of investigation. Let's close with prayer. Holy God, we thank you for your goodness and mercy towards us. As we have entered into this special time where we transition from one dispensation to another, be with us, answer our questions, answer our desires, and overall, help us to understand the truth. In Jesus' name, amen. I want to apologize, I went a little bit over time.
Thank you for joining us online. The next meeting will be in half an hour. We'll see you then.